I'm Laura Bonnell, and this is the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast coming to you from Detroit. Please subscribe and even rate and comment on our podcasts when it moves you. I learn something new with every podcast, and I'm always inspired by the people that are showcased here. We don't give medical advice. You need to connect with your doctor for that. I hope that this Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast educates you and sparks some volunteering or advocacy. The CF community needs people like you. Thanks to our sponsors, Viatris and Vertex, for their support. So this introduction is going to be short because these 5 friends of mine have accomplished so much in science, research, and advocacy that it's important to just do a quick summary, or I would be doing the introduction for a full half hour. So you can find their full bios in the show notes, and I encourage you to do so and check them out on LinkedIn and more because they're just incredible people. Today's episode features a powerhouse panel of experts from biotech, government law, and innovation. Dr. Andy Kocab, Vice President of Research at ONL Therapeutics, leads vision-saving drug development for retinal disease. He spoke powerfully on Capitol Hill about the importance of reauthorizing the SBIR-STTR grant program, making complex science understandable to legislators. And Harold Chase is the Director of Government Affairs at NSF, and he brings decades of experience in health policy and public service. And he spent 17 years with Senator Carl Levin working on legislation like the Farm Bill and the Food Safety Modernization Act. Thomas Moga, a veteran patent attorney and partner at Dykema, offers insight from over 30 years in global IP law, including a fascinating chapter of his career that was in China. Dr. Brandon McNaughton is the CEO of Actium Life Sciences, and it's an award-winning entrepreneur turning scientific breakthroughs into real-world solutions in cell therapy and diagnostics. And Dr. Stephen Rapundolo is a recognized leader in the biosciences industry with a background in pharmaceutical R&D, public policy, and civic leadership. And he spent 2 decades in drug discovery at Park Davis and Pfizer before becoming president of MichBio, where he elevated Michigan's life sciences sector through advocacy and innovation. And he is actually the chair of the Rare Disease Advisory Council in Michigan, and I am the vice chair, so we have become good friends. In April, we were all on Capitol Hill advocating for the biotech industry, and we met with lawmakers to discuss all sorts of legislation that was out there. And it was a wonderful experience, and that's why I asked them to share it, to inspire others and educate and just give you an idea of what it is like to advocate in general and in DC. So you're going to love these guys. Thanks for joining us. It's wonderful to have everybody here. Thank you so much. This is the largest crew that I've ever had on a podcast. So thank you all so much. Great to see everybody again. We are a good team. I think that Dr. Rapundolo does a great organization of getting everybody as we advocate in DC. And we're going to start with Dr. Kocab and Dr. McNaughton. That's Andy and Brandon. And this was your first year in DC advocating. What were your impressions? What did you feel that you learned, and did you feel heard? And we'll start with Dr. Kocab.
I really enjoyed my time in Washington. I think it was nice to travel with a nice group that were all kind of in it together, which was nice. It was nice to work with Stephen on this whole adventure, and I did learn that one does have to walk very quickly to keep up with Stephen. But it was nice to interact with the congressional staffers and the members of Congress, and you did feel heard, and it was nice. It was highly enjoyable, and hopefully get to do it again in the future.
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, Laura. I appreciate it. As far as my impressions and my overall experience, I was somewhat reluctant, I would say, to go to DC and do something like this. I always have the perspective of, doing my work and not going and doing those sorts of things. And I think after a few conversations with Stephen, I was like, I should go at least and do it. This is my first time. And, I think it was definitely worth the time and interesting. I've never thought of myself personally as an advocate. I've always thought about doing those things through my work, through my volunteer, just through interactions kind of with in the day-to-day with people. And what was interesting, I think I was probably a little bit cynical, but having been there, I think what's neat is you kind of see how it works. And it's not any one thing, right? You never know what conversation, what idea, what connection that's made that leads to something that may be impactful in policy or otherwise. And so I think it was just really nice to go. And, it was probably, I was surprised by how engaging the conversations were and how well informed a lot of the folks we met with were. So overall, I was actually very appreciative and was glad I had the opportunity to go.
And I have to say, I think everybody is so smooth and was so prepared. And Dr. Kocab, you were smooth and you got all your information out. It was like you had done this before. And then Dr. McNaughton, you were like almost like the closer. You kind of summarized everything. It really was a beautiful just presentation. I thought we were so organized. And Andy, who's Dr. Kocab, how do you feel leaving that? Is this something you want to do again?
I'd love to. I think it was a lot of fun. And I think to your point about how the presentations went, it was very much storytelling and getting to tell our company's story, why, what we do is important and why we needed, help from Congress to continue building our ecosystem in biotech. And I think as Brandon may also be able to comment on, a lot of these interactions with Congress did feel like investor pitches. So you do get to practice honing your story and kind of having your ask. And I thought it was interesting, but also kind of a natural extension to what we've been doing as a startup anyway.
Yeah, and you're educating here other people who either are afraid to advocate or want to advocate. So this information and the truth that you're speaking about, you didn't really think maybe you would like it, Brandon, and how it turned you around is probably very helpful and relatable to some people and really gives them an idea of what it's like. And Tom, Harold, and Dr. Rapundolo, you've been advocating in Congress for, I don't know, most of your life, it seems. Do you still feel that advocacy is making a difference? Is it harder today? Is it different? How does it just ebb and flow? And we'll start with Attorney Tom Moga and then go on to Harold Chase and then Dr. Rapundolo.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for the opportunity this morning. The criticality of advocating is to always be there, to keep pushing, to make sure that the message is being heard, to make sure that your voice and the people you represent are not forgotten. And sometimes this is the only way to succeed at doing this. It's amazing to me how many issues the people with whom we meet are missed. And they're not familiar. These are important issues. And it's a little disturbing, frankly, too, because we see it all the time. It's daily wire for us. And that these important issues should be missed. I understand these are busy people, but it is our job to fill in the blanks. And I think we are successful in doing that. And we have to keep up that head of steam.
And Harold, who has so much experience, 17 years with Senator Carl Levin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have a unique perspective, I think, amongst this group because of that fact that I was on these meetings on the other side for many years. In fact, Dr. Rapundolo used to come into my office all the time, so met with him quite often on that side. To me, this sort of education and advocacy is more important than ever. If constituents can't come in and talk about the impact of programs and what impact these have on lives and on the states and the districts that these representatives represent, it's that would be a true loss. So to me, it's very important. And it's always interesting to me when you go in, this isn't really partisan what's going on here. This isn't through the lens of Republicans or Democrats or whatever. This is through the impact of what these programs mean for individuals and for their constituents. And so to me, it's it's always encouraging whenever I go in and engage, especially when I get to those offices, even where I sometimes get pushback. I actually kind of like that, because then you get into a, real conversation about, like, and they're engaged and really trying to understand and figure out how we can make these programs work better. So, to me, that's so important.
And if you get pushback, don't they remember you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, it is a good thing. And Dr. Stephen Rapundelow?
Well, it's I've been doing this for a long time too, and I appreciate where folks like Brandon are coming from, especially if you come from a science background. I mean, we're inherently cynical. That's part of our training, or maybe we're even born with that. There must be a gene for that, I think. And so, a lot of scientist types don't feel that there's a benefit to advocacy and, again, engaging in policy. But the fact is that everything that goes on in their, whether it's at an early stage company or even at a larger company, everything about their everyday livelihoods and actions are in fact governed in one form or another by policy. So it's important to understand why those are in place, why others should be put in place. And the fact is, it's a long game, right? There are certainly many moments of frustration, because you feel like you're saying the same thing to the same people for a very long period of time, and nothing seemingly is getting done. But as Brandon pointed out, and Harold, it's the personal stories that really matter. The high-paid lobbyists, many of these offices see them all the time. But really what matters is what's going on in each of the districts, and hearing directly from constituents and what the implications are for their livelihoods. So that's because these legislators and staff get bombarded with gazillions of other issues. And so the fact is, you have to keep pounding away for a long time.
And like we've talked about before, you have to be organized. I think that's one of the things I love about advocating with MishBio and with you, Stephen, because you're very organized. Everybody knows what they're doing, and we know to keep it short, and we know to keep moving. Why do you think that is so important when people advocate? Because not every day on the Hill is organized. I've been to some that are not, and it's a completely different situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you recall this last visit of ours, the differences in the different offices, right? I mean, by and large, we had half-hour meetings scheduled, and yet impromptu circumstances, and all of a sudden, instead of 30 minutes, you might only have 15, or worse, you only have 5. And as Andrew indicated earlier, right, this is almost like an investor pitch or an elevator pitch. You then have to pivot your game plan and make sure you get across the most salient points that you want them to walk away with. And you have to be organized. You have to understand, as always, you have to understand the audience. Each office comes from a different vantage point. You have to play to their interests, to their expertise, to their, whatever issues are more dear and near to their hearts. And then, as we did, we changed up the lineup, the order of who spoke. And in some cases, some of us didn't. Because we didn't have time. So without organization, you can't play an effective game. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, Harold, go ahead.
I think one of the secrets of advocacy on the Hill is flexibility. We go in and maybe we'd only a few minutes, but then you might think you're meeting with one staffer, and then you end up meeting with another because that staffer got pulled away. Or you think you're going to meet with a member, and that member has to go vote. You might not even have a meeting space. You might end up, and I think we did this at least once during this trip, you might end up in the hallway. You never know. I mean, I've been pulled down to the cafeteria to sit down with staff before in their so-called second office, which is the cafeteria. So it's just all about that flexibility. And if you're prepared to the point, then you can roll with that. You can be flexible and you can make your point in that circumstances. You just have to expect the unexpected when you're on the Hill, and then just follow through and execute, on that.
And I felt like meeting in the hallway was cool. I thought that was like, we are really doing it, because if we're just not sitting around a table, that seems almost too easy. I felt like when we were in the hallway, they really either felt bad or they were really paying attention to us. And so it didn't matter where we met. I felt like they were listening wherever we were, but it was really cool. And I know, Stephen, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, the other piece that I would add regarding organization is about the materials that you leave behind and the information that you want to convey, right? That has to be organized so that you're only giving them what can even conceivably be digested by them, because again, they're getting bombarded with all sorts of stuff. And I've had offices and staff tell me over the years that, because I'll always say, oh, I'm sorry that I bothered you this. And they go, no. We like the fact that you're organized. You come in, you sit, you know what you're talking about. Your group conveys their message clearly and succinctly. And they, we ask for the specific things we need. And we move on. We don't pester them. We don't waste time by going on and on and on about whatever that really has little relevance to, or there's no ask. I mean, that's the one lesson I learned a long, long time ago. You always have to have an ask.
Because they want to know what to do. And if they don't know something, they'll ask you, what bill is that? Or, and if you don't know the answer, you can tell them you'll get back to them. And they appreciate that. I think the honesty goes both ways. And Harold, I wanted to start with you and go around to everybody on this one. First of all, it's an obvious answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. Should someone take sides, partisan sides, when they go in to talk to someone? First, let's start with that. And then I did want to follow up and ask you about, what if you get a legislative aide instead of the actual representative or senator? Because that happens all the time. But Harold, start us off with those answers.
No, I mean, you should never be just partisan. This is all about, framing this and how a policy is impacting their constituents. I mean, that's what it's about. So it's not like, oh, I'm taking this position because I'm a Democrat or Republican or whatever it is. It's about, well, here's what the policy is. This is what the impact is, or this is how this program is helping these constituents, changing their lives, or so that's the sort of framing that you need. And you need to have numbers. You need to have facts that back that up, so that it's more of a factual presentation as to what impacts are. And then, as far as not meeting with a member, I'll jump in on that one. I don't know how many interns I've met over the years, not just even, a staffer. I get an intern meeting, and in a couple of years, that intern might be a chief of staff. I mean, it maybe even a member of Congress eventually. So you should never react poorly to that. Always be gracious. These are very bright, dedicated people coming to the Hill who, are incredibly sharp and engaged. So it doesn't really matter, what level. It is disappointing if you thought you had a meeting with a member, but they have a vote. They have to go over and they got pulled out for some reason. So it's understanding that. And then, if you kind of treat that staffer badly, that really can burn you in the long run, because they may be a very high-ranking member of staff in just a very short time.
And they're so smart. They know everything. I mean, in all these years, I've never run across any of them that didn't know their stuff. And Thomas, what was your experience? How did you feel?
Well, the first thing, as far as cool meetings, last year I seem to recall that we had a meeting in the stairwell.
Yes,
And I thought that was uniquely cool. little loud, but it echoes. It was pretty cool. The
And great photos.
yeah,
We
good
must.
photos.
We do have. Yeah, yeah.
I think that it's difficult to avoid the partisan component if you're there to advocate for a position. In my situation, I was talking about Bayh-Dole and amendments that are proposed and talking about patent waivers. And almost inevitably, these are partisan issues. What we need to do is keep the partisan out of it and try and explain why these are beneficial, why these changes are risky for everybody, for all institutions in the Bayh-Dole regarding universities, whether it's startups, and to remove the partisan component as best as possible and to put it into a more generic, this could affect everybody in this way. But the last point is what's important. None of us, I think, expected to walk out with oh my gosh, a decision was made by the person with whom we met. The idea is that in my case, when I talk about Bayh-Dole, I talk about patent waiver. Should these issues come up before that legislative official, they'll have an idea as to how to respond. They'll have information that they probably didn't have before. And so we can't expect a quick fix, but we do hope to leave an Easter egg, if you will, some information that they can manage later on. I lied. I did have one final point. Sorry, Laura.
Sure.
The legislative assistant versus the actual senator representative. My analogy is you want to get through to a judge, you go through the clerk.
That's a great analogy. And I also wanted to say you have so much experience in China as well because you lived there and worked there. And did you want to briefly tell everyone what Bayh-Dole is, what you were talking with legislators about? Because I'm going to briefly have everybody kind of say what they talked about.
That's fine. Bayh-Dole was enacted in the late 1980s. I'm sorry, late 70s, and was active in 80. It was developed in the late 70s. And it was an answer to the need for universities and startup companies to have government funding. The idea was that you get government funding, and it's very beneficial. But the one holdout was that, keep in mind, at a certain point, if that patent becomes necessary, national emergency, COVID, then the government reserves the right to march in and be able to relicense that patent to a pharmaceutical, to somebody generic, whatever it might be. And that has worked for 4 decades plus. But there was a push last fall by the former administration to change the threshold necessary to reach that march-in right level, to reduce it in an effort to control drug pricing. And we bring that to the attention that this is still out there. It has not been withdrawn, the proposal. And it's that sort of thing that we have to focus on, which is beneficial to all researchers, beneficial to universities, and can have a great result if we hold it as it was and not as it wasn't intended to be, which is to make it a drug price control. So I'm advocating now. So there I go.
I love it. Thank you. And Dr. Brandon McNaughton, just to refresh your memory, because we've been jumping around, but to talk about, meeting with aides versus senators. And then I think the other thing I was trying to say also was I've been in a room where somebody was bashing the opposite side of the aisle, which is a huge no-no. Keep that to yourself. But I wanted your thoughts, and then we'll go to Dr. Kocab and Dr. Rapundolo after.
Yeah, I may have a contrary viewpoint, at least in this day and age, that I just don't really believe in partisan thinking per se. I believe more in the human condition and that everybody figures that out in a different way. So to me, I always try to focus on how we're alike, not how we're different. Because if you actually look at it, we're 99.999% similar, but then wars, violence, anger, all results from a point like 0.0001% difference. And I made a choice in life to focus on how we're the same, not how we're different. So I think what that means in the current climate, especially going to Washington, D.C., is to try to see the people, right? Try to see the humans involved. And I think that's also how you overcome partisan issues, even heated ones, is that it's everybody's stories, right? And everybody has a story. I mean, everybody has value, and in that they have their own stories. And so that's at least how I approached it. And, I think the topics we were there to talk about affect our community, and they also affect Michigan. It's funny for me the main topic I wanted to talk about the whole time was how wonderful Michigan is and how doing the things we're talking about and advocating for can actually improve the state and improve the economy and the companies that are here. But that's at least like as far as, the whole partisan thing, that's just how I think about it. And the game of politics has been going on for thousands of years. I don't think I'm going to win it and while I'm alive. So I'd rather not play that game and just look at people as who they are. I think that goes back to who you're speaking to, right? If you're meeting with the janitor, right? And I talked to a janitor outside of a bathroom, and we had a great conversation about like DC and what was going on. And because again, it's like, if you take the viewpoint that everyone matters, it doesn't matter if it's the aide or the actual member themselves. Maybe it can be a more impactful discussion, but you never know what spark, what thought, what idea propagates and gets shared, right? That's sort of the nonlinear, unpredictable aspect of sharing knowledge and sharing your passion.
Yes, so true. And everybody does agree that these are all bipartisan. And especially what I always say is in regard to rare disease, it's on everybody. It's on both sides. So there isn't any partisan issue about a rare disease. And I also have to tell everyone, even though you're not native to Michigan, I think you love Michigan more than all of us put together, if that's possible. Brandon talked about his love of Michigan more than anyone I've ever been around in my life.
It's the greatest state to live in.
Kudos to you. You should be a spokesperson for like pure Michigan.
That's right.
They haven't called yet, so.
Well, we're going to have to tweet them. But Dr. Andy Kocab, what are your thoughts?
So I definitely agree with Brandon and what he was saying. As I was joking, he is kind of my favorite philosopher in our group. But I think my approach is a little bit more practical. Ultimately, I'm asking these staffers and these members of Congress to help my company and companies like us. And you don't get very far if you start, saying things that are going to upset them. So I think definitely taking a nonpartisan approach to things and really emphasizing kind of how certain actions that they could take would help people back in the community, like others have said, I think was really key. And I think we did a very good job of staying nonpartisan. And I think to Stephen's point, sometimes we tweak our stories or emphasize certain aspects depending on who we're talking to. But I think that's how you need to play the game, because you are trying to tailor your message to your audience and make it memorable and trying to make a connection.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were continuing.
I was just going to switch over to the other question about meeting with legislative staffers versus the actual member of Congress. It was definitely fun to meet with members of Congress, shake a senator's hand or get a picture with a congressperson. But at the same time, when we had our breakfast reception and just talking to the legislative staffers, I felt like you had more of an opportunity to make a connection with these people and, be a little bit more memorable and get to know each other on a more personal level and really see that they're, humans and not just kind of a nameless, faceless, machine in government that's, churning out laws or whatever. So I thought it was nice to interact with those people at that breakfast.
And they're the wheels of the machine, right? I mean,
Exactly.
They are just keeping it, all the plates up in the air. They're keeping it going. And before we move on to Dr. Rapundelow, I just want to back up to Harold, Brandon, and then you, Andy, talk briefly about your issues, because Harold has more information in his brain than anyone I know, I'm just saying, impressive, wow.
Some of the things I was talking about, it was very interesting timing for how this played out. Just in the days before we went to the Hill, it had been announced that FDA in particular was going to see 3,500 people let go. So I kind of pivoted from what some of the things I normally talk about on past visits and really just focused on, okay, we didn't even know. In real time that morning, FDA staff were going in, trying to scan into the building, and that was when they were finding out if they were still employed or not. So, my request was just simply, let's make sure that, if we have to right size government, if we have to positions have to be eliminated, that we're doing it in a good way, that we're not taking essential people out, that we're not impacting drug approval, med device approval, food safety inspections, cosmetic dietary supplements, all the many things that FDA has oversight on. So that was really my message. And then combine that with as we were, perennially in this town talking about appropriations. So as we're talking about cutting, spending, that again, we do that in a smart way. We make sure that, the essential parts of government that people want, that we make sure that funding is still there. So that was really my message on the Hill. I thought it was very well received because, again, wasn't put into a partisan viewpoint. It was just like, let's just make sure. And then especially when it comes to these sort of decisions from the administration, I mean, Congress and the executive branch are co-equal branches. There's supposed to be oversight there. They're supposed to work together and collaboratively to, make sure. That's how our Constitution's set up. So, phrased that way, I think that, it was a very good reception from all sides of the Hill, and just, and if we're going to be taking actions, we do it in a responsible way.
Thank you. Brandon?
So one of my passion areas is just science and how it gets done and how it gets funded. I mean, that's just, if you go back to the origination of science, it's always a struggle of where do you get the funds to actually pay for the science to get done. So within that category, what I was speaking about was R&D tax amortization. I know, very an exciting sounding topic, but it does affect science funding and how companies fund their R&D work, and then because of how it's actually paid for. And, the other thing I tried to do too, just with the human element and kind of the story of the companies that we have here in Michigan, is how all the topics we are talking about could affect any single company along their trajectory from formation to, a successful company.
Yeah, I think everybody's talks were interesting. I learned so much, and that's the beauty of it. I know everybody we were talking to learned a lot from all of us. So, Dr. Andy Kocab.
So similar to Brandon, I was advocating for a mechanism of funding for startups in the biotech world, as well as other technology companies. These are small business innovation grants. So the SBIR and STTR program. These are grants given by various funding agencies like the National Institutes of Health, for instance, the Department of Defense. And they're really designed to help small startups in early stages like we were, get up off the ground, start to develop your technology, and then get it to a point where you can start to attract additional investment from the professional venture capital firms. And so as a startup that we spun out of the University of Michigan, we definitely relied on these grants for some of our early stage funding. And the program is currently set to expire in September. So we were advocating for the renewal of this program and trying to emphasize the benefit it provides to the biotech ecosystem in Michigan.
Thank you. And Dr. Stephen Rapunzelo, if you want to talk again about what you talked about, and then your thoughts on, meeting with aides versus senators or representatives.
Yeah, well, let me start with that first, perhaps. Like others have said, the fact is that the elected officials simply don't have the time because they're in committee meetings and votes and whatnot to meet with pretty much most visitors. So they pick and choose as time permits. I just tell people all the time that, if we are able to sit down with an elected official, that's just icing on the cake. It is the staff. They're the whisperers. They're the ones that are presenting their bosses with the recommended position. And so good officials have good staff, and you try to go in there prepared. Ultimately everything is comes down to trust. So your data, your information, your position has to be backed up, verifiable, defensible, and you have to convey it in a fair manner, and in an unbiased manner. Now, however, having said that, as Andy sort of alluded to earlier, I do take a little bit more nuanced approach. It's in many cases in our delegation, many of these elected officials I've known for a very long time. Some are personal friends. So I perhaps will take a little bit more liberty in kind of slipping over into the partisan divide, but it has to be done strategically. But when all is said and done, it comes down to what you're presenting, and then that has to be solid and that they can trust it. to use it in their position, because if you fail that test, it's bound to hurt you the next time you show up. As far as issues and such, aside from the ones that have already been mentioned, when MishBio goes in there, we go in with a full roster of issues. Sometimes I worry it's too much. And we always joke that we leave a packet or as a leftover in case they have insomnia and they need something to read at the wee hours of the morning. But one does worry that, do they really, or as soon as we walk out the door, it's, tossed away along with all the other thousands of others that come through on a daily basis. But certainly, in addition to what was already described, we talked about a variety of legislation, either already introduced or about to be introduced at the time, related to drug pricing and implications of that for pharmaceutical manufacturing and development, which we have a lot of here in the Michigan ecosystem. Some of those were outcomes of, not the least of which, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, which passed in the end of 2022, 23, boy, time flies. As we argued before that legislation was passed about what the outcomes would be, here we are today talking about those very outcomes and now needing fixes to them if the United States is going to maintain its primacy in pharmaceutical innovation and development. So there was about 4 or 5 bills, some including in the rare disease space, that we wanted to see passed. A number of them were reintroductions because they never got taken care of in the last legislative session. So there was no shortage of issues.
There were not, and mine was the longest title, I have to say. Rare Pediatric Disease Priority Review Voucher Program at the FDA. That was a lot. And anyone can jump in here, but if somebody wants to advocate and they can't travel to DC, or maybe they can't even travel to Lansing, to the Capitol, what advice or thoughts do you have for them? Because obviously everyone cannot do that. They're in different phases of their lives. They're raising their kids. They're just in the middle of, crazy life. What advice do you have?
Yeah, I'm going to kick off on this one because I actually, some of my career in the Senate, I was actually working in a state-based office. Worked up in Traverse City, had an office in Alpena, spent a lot of time representing my senator around Michigan, around that part of Michigan. But the officials, the elected officials, have staff in the state, not just in the state capital. I mean, these are federal officials, so they have district offices. The senators have them all over the state, and then some of the bigger congressional offices, you might even have a couple, depending on the size of their district. So you can go and meet with their district staff. You can invite the elected official to come. If you have an office, you can invite them to come and tour the office. That's a great way to get them engaged. I find actually that, because of that, we talked about how hectic it can be. You're doing these hallway meetings, the elected officials getting called off. Oh, we were going to meet with them, but they got called to a vote or to a committee hearing. If you can succeed to get them to your facility back home, you usually get a lot more focus, there's a lot less distraction, and you can really show them. They can then come in and they can talk to your employees. They can talk to individuals who are being directly impacted by whatever it is that you're trying to talk about. So, to me, that's a really great way to be an advocate, is to try and get them to come right to you. And if they can't come, their district and state staff will often come and meet, and that's often a precursor. In fact, a good state staffer will come in and meet with you, and then if you've made a good enough presentation, they'll become the advocate for you to get their boss to come and meet with you.
And Brandon, didn't you do that a couple times?
Yeah, and on this point in particular, like how I think about it, am reminded of a story or an experience I had where I had a chance to meet with Paul Rusesabagina. And if you know the name, he did that movie Hotel Rwanda. So he was the one that he's credited with saving like 1,000 people's lives. And I remember at the time being so affected by that and just they're feeling helpless. Like, what do we, what am I supposed to do? I was probably in my 20s. I remember a conversation with him. I just asked him, like, well, what are we supposed to do? Like, like we sit here and we see these things, what do we do? And I think about that for other topics. And one of the scariest feelings is that of helplessness, right? And sometimes that goes away very quickly when you take action. Say, okay, I'm going to do something about this. And that's what he said when I asked him a question. He said, just do something, do anything. And I think if somebody listening, has some pain they're experiencing or something they want to advocate for, whatever that is, if it's a medical issue, if it's a personal situation, it doesn't hurt to share your story, share your pain. Now, when it gets through, you can't always guarantee how somebody might want to solve it. They may want to solve it different than you, but you never know how that gets through, right? So whether it's an email, a phone call, like Neighbor Harold said, it's a meeting in your office. It's some sort of reach out because, life can be a struggle at times, and the hope is we grow from the struggle. But, there's been issues over my life that I've cared about, everything from autism to, science to just, trying to improve the human condition. And it always felt better when you just did something, right? Whether it's volunteer, communicating with people who are also in the same position, just trying to get the word out there. So like in a general sense, that's how I think about, advocacy is just doing something. And, you never know what it is. Like sometimes one little thing, which you think would have no effect, is the sort of the catalyst that changes everything. And that's what history proves. It's in physics, we call it the butterfly effect, right? But the butterfly has to flap its wings to cause a hurricane. It doesn't know if it's going to cause a hurricane, but unless it flaps its wings, you don't know that that's going to happen. So that's how I think about just topics we care about and things that we feel.
Thank you. So I have two other questions I wanted to ask, and I guess keep this answer short because there's a lot of us. But how important is legislative advocacy to your company or this industry? And Thomas, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Stephen and continue on.
For me, it's all about raising awareness. And this is the one unique opportunity, hopefully we'll never take it for granted, where we can get our positions in front of people who make a difference, who can affect the lives and the effectiveness of corporations and universities in this country. And for me, it's a privilege to be able to meet and discuss these issues and spend time, because I know their time is very valuable. And it's an honor to do it. And I'm glad Mishbio has been so effective at organizing, and Stephen's done a wonderful job. And he keeps us in line. Don't question about that. But it's
truly,
it's very effective, and it's a great way to get the message across.
Ditto. I mean, it's absolutely critical because the implications, as I said, are at the top. Everything that we do in our business and personal lives is in one way or another impacted by policy and regulations and law. And so, going to the Capitol Hill or to our state capitol, I mean, that's where all of that is developed and implemented. And so it behooves us to be there talking with the officials and the staff that make that all happen. And you can do that in their offices, but as Harold pointed out, you can do it in other venues too. I just was at one of our member companies last Friday, and there was about half a dozen or more state legislators. But then one of our Congress people whose office we visited ended up showing up, and I brought a topic up with him, and he informed me that he had heard about it via his staffer that we met with. So just when you think that they don't, listen, or there's not a natural follow on, there you go, proof in the pudding that, we do get across. So it's absolutely critical.
And Andy?
I think for startups like ourselves, we're so busy with so many other things that we sometimes forget or don't realize how important advocacy is. But as I mentioned, like the issue that I was talking about with grant funding, that was vital for companies like ourselves. And so we might not have existed had this funding not been there. So, making sure that we send this message to Congress so that we help companies like ourselves as well as the rest of the ecosystem is really important. So I'm really glad that I was able to join the group, and I had a lot of fun. So definitely important.
And Brandon, and then Harold.
Yeah, the company I work for, Acadian Life Sciences, it exists for one reason, to serve our customers, right, to solve their problems. And the reality is our customers are just as affected by the policy in DC as we are. And so that's one of the reasons, like, I went, because, just kind of given policy considerations and such, there's a lot of questions. And even when I visited some of our customers in the field around the DC area, they're very interested to just hear what was going on. They said, oh, you guys were there on Liberation Day. What was that like? What was going on? What was and just being able to kind of share that direct experience and knowledge is of interest and relevance to our customers. And they're going through their own questions. And so we got to have conversations around that. So I think it's useful and appreciated, Stephen, and grateful for the opportunity to go.
These sort of events and having these personal stories being told. I mean, Laura, the impact of when you talk about, these programs and the difference it's made on the quality of life of your family and your daughters. I mean, it's extremely powerful, and it just really conveys, the impact in a way that maybe, big lobby programs here in DC don't convey. Same thing with the impact of these programs on these startup companies. These are jobs in Michigan that have been created. These are people being employed. It's impacted people's lives. These are new cures that are being developed that are going to ripple out, being right done in Michigan through these programs. So to me, that is an incredibly impactful message that resonates with these staff, with these lawmakers, and really kind of, puts a pin on why these are so important, not just from a partisan perspective, but, what is the impact on Michigan? What is the impact on communities? What is the impact on people's lives?
Thank you. And thank you all. I have one last question, but I did want to say, too, from a nonprofit perspective, a caregiver, a CF parent, just ignore the cat behind me, the foundation mascot, haha. But is that if somebody is a busy parent, it is okay. You can just write a letter. You can make a phone call. There's something, you can support other efforts. There are many different ways to advocate if, they can't make it locally or nationally somewhere to advocate. And my last question is, what was the funnest part of advocating for you? I mean, I love the running around from place to place and just hearing everybody talk, because I learned so much from all of you. But what did you enjoy the most, just quickly as we wrap this up? Stephen, we'll start with you.
What puts a smile on my face is the little personal anecdotes or, little things that you find common ground with, mostly more on the personal side rather than the professional or the policy side. You really do find out there's a small world of who knows who and this and that. And that those kinds of instances is what engenders trust. So when you're talking about the other big issues, there's that personal connection that really matters. So that's the most fun part.
Agree. Thomas?
Feeling like you are making a difference. That your voice, that the comments, that the issues you advocated for are being listened to. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. But at least getting the opportunity to do it, it was a great feeling.
Thank you. And Harold?
I always like the bond that gets formed by the group that's there together for a couple of days. You're sort of in the trenches. So and Thomas and I have now done this a few years in a row. Of course, Dr. Rupandalo, Laura, you and I have been together now for a few years. And it's just always great. And then we bring in new people, and just to me, that's actually one of the more energizing things. I mean, you kind of you come out of this and you're like, you feel a bond now with these individuals.
Right. And our group has such a personality. It had such a great personality. I just loved it and learned something from everyone. But Brandon, your thoughts?
I mean, I just loved being there for the first time as a new experience for me. So there was a novelty in that. And just you hear about Capitol Hill, and then when you see it, it's just kind of very fascinating. And then seeing the offices and what they have in the offices and who they are as people. And the fact that we were from Michigan and they were from Michigan also was a highlight for me. It was cool to see the districts and how they viewed their districts and the things they had up about their districts. And it was a cool opportunity. And I appreciated just learning.
And Andy?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. Going last, you guys took all my ideas, but it was a lot of fun to just be there and see how the whole process works. How does policy get made? And the energy of running around to different offices was a lot of fun, but also just seeing the environment. I mean, we weren't the only group there. There were other groups, and just seeing what they were advocating for. There were firefighters there. There were people talking about water rights. There were all sorts of miscellaneous causes that were being talked to. So it's just interesting to see how all the pieces fit together, and then it'll be fun to see what comes out on the other side.
Yeah, and I agree with all of you. And I think it's a reminder, too, that government isn't this thing. It's us. It is all of us. It only works or is messed up because of us. So we are this continuous working creature of government and constituents and recipients of laws. So we all just need to keep moving and keep doing what we're doing. And I appreciate all of you. I encourage everyone listening to look all of these great people up on their LinkedIn or anywhere you can find them, because they are making a difference in not only Michigan, but I would say our country. And they're very cool. I know it's a word I've used a couple times, but you are such badass people. I really do love and appreciate all of you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks.
The original music in this podcast is performed by Kevin Allen,
It's not complicated.
who happens to have cystic fibrosis.
We all got our worries and fears. I know it's got you frustrated, but loving you is so alright.
This has been the Living with Cystic Fibrosis podcast. For more information and to learn more about the Bonnell Foundation, visit our website at thebonnellfoundation.org. That's the BONNELL Foundation.org. This podcast was sponsored by Vertex Pharmaceutical, The Science of Possibility, and Viatris. It was produced by Jag and Detroit Podcasts. Follow our show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now.